We have the 18 Hex games collection, and just to avoid any confusion here, this is not 18 games. This is actually 3 different games, but they each have 18 tiles. And each of these games are super easy to teach and learn. I think each one looks like a lot of fun and offers something a little bit different from the last. And for that reason, this one is my own personal pick of the week. And the 3 games that this is offering is Pantheon, HEX Tremadura, and ISO. And Pantheon is a 2-player head-to-head asymmetric strategy game where one player is going to be playing as Greece and the other player is playing as Rome. Each tile in this game is double-sided with Rome on one side and Greece on the other. But there is one special tile in this game, and it's called the coin tile, and the thing that makes this tile different is it's the first tile out on the board. And players are going to be taking turns putting one tile out onto the board, and each tile in this game is going to have a special ability, but the ability never affects itself. It always affects another tile either adjacent to it or out on the board. And this can do different things like move tiles around, flip tiles to the other side, or even put some tiles on top of other tiles. Players will gain victory points for each of their visible tiles at the end of the game, and whichever player has their side face up on the coin tile will also gain 3 points, and then players can also gain victory points equal to the number of tiles that they have in their biggest group of tiles. And after all the tiles are placed, the player with the most victory points wins the game. And the next game, HEX Tremadura, plays quite a bit differently, where each of the tiles is going to be broken up into 6 different sections, and each of the sections can be one of 3 different terrain types. Each of these tiles are also double-sided, but one side is going to have a basic objective and then the other one's going to have an advanced objective. And each of the basic objectives is going to have a certain terrain type as well as a number of sections that need to be joined together in order to complete that objective. The advanced objectives work very similar to this, but instead of the terrain types having to be adjacent to the tile, they can actually be anywhere on the board. And players are going to start with an equal number of tiles, and they're going to be taking turns placing tiles out onto the play area. And if you're able to meet the requirements of 1 or more basic tiles, you'll be able to take those tiles back into your supply, but then flip them to their advanced objective side. And the game just continues with players putting tiles out into the play area. Gaining advanced tiles doesn't change the game in any way. It just gives you another option of tiles to put out onto the board. You'll just really want to be the ones to gain those advanced tiles, because then that gives you control of when to put them out onto the board, and the advanced tiles are the only objectives that will grant you victory points for the end of the game. After all the tiles are placed, you add up your victory points, and the player with the most points wins the game. And this third one plays quite a bit different than the previous 2, and it plays up to 3 players where the previous 2 just played up to 2 players. But the one similarity that this one does have is that it also does have double-sided tiles, and in this game one side of the tile is going to be a block of a certain color with a certain identifier on it. Then the other side is just going to have some random objectives. The game starts with all the tiles face up showing the block side, and they're all shuffled together into a single draw deck. 3 of these tiles are going to be drawn into a supply, and then 3 of them are going to be drawn and flipped to reveal 3 objectives. And once again, the rules are very simple here. Players are just going to be taking turns choosing a tile from the supply and then replenishing it, and then placing that tile into the main play area. Just like with the other 2 games, you always have to place the tile adjacent to an existing tile, but what you're trying to do here is match up certain tiles together in order to complete the different objectives. And each of the different objectives is going to be asking you to create certain patterns in order to complete that objective. And I know on the surface here that sounds like a very basic way to score victory points, but there is something really clever here that I want to point out, and it's actually so clever it's kind of difficult for me to explain without using some special images, so I'm going to pull up the rulebook and do my best to try and explain exactly how these patterns work. So each of the objectives has some sort of requirement on it, but if you look at these objective cards, they're all 2D, where each of these tiles is actually 3D. And what I mean by that is you want to view these hexes more as cubes, where you can see 3 sides of each cube. So this diagram on the left here beside the objectives represents what the hexes could look like after they are placed out onto the board. And what you have to do is kind of mentally shift your perspective to just be viewing one side of the cubes at a time. So if you're just looking at the left side, you would see the pattern A, and if you're just looking at the B side, you would see the pattern B, and if you're looking from the top, you would see the pattern C. And I'll just give you a second to look at these and connect the dots and make those connections. You got it? Great. And if you're able to complete any of those objectives looking at any one of those 3 perspectives, then you will gain that objective card into your hand, and that's going to grant you victory points at the end of the game. Some of the objectives are more difficult than others, so they are worth more victory points at the end of the game if you are able to complete them, and the player with the most victory points wins the game. So if you're interested in a little collection of travel size games that each play very different from each other, but then also have a really simple rule set with quite a lot of depth, I think this is definitely a campaign to check out, and don't forget you can click that notify me button from the link in the description below.